You get the atmosphere. I mean, I did find it harrowing. I mean,
Did you find it harrowing?
I did.
The confrontation between Princess Anne and Queen Camilla erupted without warning at the very heart of the royal family, after Anne discovered that a plan involving Gatcombe Park was still being quietly advanced, even though she had firmly refused it. Logistics teams appeared on site. Partners believed the venue had already been approved, and more troubling, still certain people inside the palace insisted they were simply following instructions from Camilla's side. Camilla immediately denied every accusation, but Anne was not prepared to let the matter rest. When one member of staff unexpectedly agreed to recount what had truly taken place behind closed doors, the atmosphere within the royal household shifted rapidly, and the truth began to surface. Was Camilla merely trying to protect her own reputation? Or was Anne about to uncover a secret far larger than a dispute over Gatcombe Park? Recently, while the British royal family was working hard to strengthen its image before international opinion, Camilla unexpectedly proposed hosting a reception for major sponsors at Gatcombe Park. She wished to make use of the spacious, approachable, and unpretentious character of the estate managed by Princess Anne in order to project the impression of a modern, accessible monarchy. She presented the idea to her closest advisors as a strategic move designed to attract important financial support for public and charitable work and to enhance the monarchy's standing in the eyes of overseas partners. Camilla's office moved with remarkable speed. Within only a few days, a preliminary plan had been completed. They sketched out a detailed schedule, estimated the number of guests, and prepared a list of potential sponsors from Europe, Asia, and America. Without waiting for formal agreement from the owner of Gatcombe Park, they had already made contact with several key partners. Invitations were sent out, accompanied by promises of a formal yet warm occasion held in the historic grounds of the Princess. Several logistics firms also received preliminary information and began preparing survey arrangements. Everything proceeded in silence, as though the decision had already been taken. Camilla believed this was an opportunity not to be missed. She felt she was making a positive contribution to the shared work of the royal family, and that Gatcombe Park, with its simple beauty, would be a far better choice than any of the great palaces. In her mind, Anne would certainly understand and support the idea. Reality proved entirely different. That evening, an internal meeting was called in a private room at the palace. The atmosphere, already strained by other matters, grew heavier still when Camilla's plan was placed on the table. Anne sat upright, listening to the presentation in silence. When the official finished speaking, she did not need long to consider. Her voice rang out clearly and decisively, without the slightest hesitation. Gatcombe is preparing for the Equestrian Festival and the charitable events that have been scheduled for many months. They cannot be cancelled. I refuse. The short statement carried enough weight to silence the entire room. Anne explained further that the timetable at Gatcombe had long been fixed, involving hundreds of participants, separate charitable sponsors, and family traditions she had always upheld. Suddenly, converting the estate to an international event would destroy every existing arrangement and damage her own standing with the local community and the long-established charities she supported. Camilla nodded at the time. She offered a few conciliatory words in a mild tone that appeared to show outward respect. "I understand. We shall look for another solution." The tension in the room seemed to ease. Many present believed the matter had been settled amicably. Anne said nothing further, merely noting the temporary consensus. Yet the very next day, nothing had changed. That fact caused the conflict to erupt in earnest. Anne quickly received reports that preparations were still underway. Her feelings at that moment were a mixture of astonishment and anger. Gatcombe Park was not merely a piece of land. It was the place to which she had been attached for decades, a reflection of her way of life and her responsibilities towards charitable work and her passion for horses. From that moment, the distance between the two women began to widen. Civil words were still exchanged, but beneath them lay suspicion and resentment. What had seemed a straightforward proposal for a sponsor's reception had become the starting point of a simmering confrontation in which power, pride, and control of territory collided directly. The following day, Princess Anne received the first report that made her stop everything she was doing. Several logistics teams had arrived early. They brought surveying equipment, cameras, and preliminary drawings and began examining the extensive grounds around the main house. They asked staff about access for large vehicles, possible sites for reception marquees, parking for hundreds of guests, and even areas for the press. What shocked Anne most was the attitude of these people. They were entirely convinced that the venue had been formally approved, that all formalities were complete, and that they merely had to implement an already agreed plan. Anne immediately ordered an investigation. Among the internal papers brought to her were notes stating clearly that her office had given its consent. Some documents even carried marks suggesting confirmation from Gatcombe itself. Anne looked at each page and declared in a voice as cold as steel, "I have never approved anything connected with this event." She remembered the previous evening's meeting with perfect clarity, and every firm word of refusal she had spoken. The appearance of these papers left her in no doubt that this was no ordinary error. Her suspicions quickly turned towards Camilla. She believed that despite the outward agreement, Camilla had deliberately kept the plan to use Gatcombe Park alive, as though approval had already been granted. Anne's anger at that moment was the slow-burning fury of someone accustomed to controlling everything on her own territory and unwilling to be presented with a fait accompli. She demanded a complete review of the approval process, from the earliest email exchanges to internal telephone calls, from the list of those given responsibility to the minutes of meetings. Nothing was to be overlooked. The review took place in an atmosphere of tension. Anne's assistants worked without rest, cross-checking every timeline. The results showed that after the previous evening's meeting instructions had still been issued from Camilla's office requiring continued contact with the logistics firms, and that the survey appointments already arranged should not be cancelled. Anne sat in silence as she heard the report, yet the look in her eyes was enough to tell everyone in the room that she no longer regarded the matter as trivial. That evening, Anne went to see Camilla and confronted her directly. Camilla insisted it was merely a misunderstanding in the coordination between the two offices. She spoke in a mild tone, striving to remain calm. "I told them to stop. Perhaps someone misheard or misunderstood. I had no intention of continuing after you refused." Anne did not believe her. She looked at Camilla with cold eyes, sensing clearly the lack of candor in every explanation. To Anne, Gatcombe Park was not a place that could be used at will. It was the space she had built over many years, bound up with the charitable work and the passion for horses she had always protected. The conflict that had only simmered since the previous evening now escalated into an open confrontation within the household. Anne would not accept being presented with a fait accompli. Camilla would not accept being forced to abandon entirely a plan she considered important. The distance between them grew clearer, and both understood that the matter would not end with a few explanations. Going back several weeks before the crisis erupted, Camilla had sat with her closest advisors to discuss venues for the reception of international sponsors. Among the various options put forward, Gatcombe Park emerged as the one she supported most strongly. She emphasized, "This place carries an approachable, unpretentious image, quite different from the formality that can sometimes feel distant in the great palaces. An international event held here would help the royal family present a simpler, more accessible face." The advisors listened and gradually agreed. They began building the plan around that idea. Camilla felt encouraged. She regarded it as a practical contribution to the shared image of the monarchy, a step that demonstrated vision and initiative. At that time, she was certain Anne would understand and support it, because the common interest always came first. Yet when the internal meeting took place and Anne refused outright, Camilla's feelings changed completely. Anne's decisive words made her feel slighted in front of many people. She was accustomed to her proposals being listened to and carefully considered. To be rejected so firmly wounded her pride. Immediately after the meeting, although she maintained an outward appearance of agreement, Camilla quietly allowed preparations to continue. She said only briefly to an assistant, "Keep the same pace. Do not stop completely." She did not order a full halt. Instead, she instructed staff to continue making contact and to keep the Gatcombe option ready, as though everything were still progressing. Once guests and sponsors began to be formally approached, the situation became increasingly difficult to reverse. Invitations had already been sent. Some important partners had confirmed their attendance. Changing the venue at that point would mean explanations, apologies, and the risk of diminished standing. Camilla looked at the list of those already contacted and grew more certain that Anne would eventually have to yield. She believed that under the pressure of reality of national interest and of the participation of major sponsors, Anne could not remain rigid indefinitely. Camilla told herself she was doing the right thing. She believed in the importance of the event and that in the end Anne would recognize it and accept. Her feelings at that moment were a mixture of determination and quiet resentment. She did not wish to be seen as someone who abandoned a plan simply because of one refusal. In her eyes, continuing the preparations was not defiance, but a way of holding the plan together for the greater good. She did not know, however, that once Anne discovered the continuing activity, she had acted swiftly and decisively. Immediately after receiving reports that logistics teams were still surveying the estate, Anne ordered every activity connected with the event at Gatcombe to stop. She went further and opened an internal inquiry to establish who had ordered the continuation and who had produced the misleading notes. Anne left no room for ambiguity. She demanded a step-by-step, person-by-person, document-by-document review. While Camilla still believed she controlled the situation and that Anne would eventually soften, the Gatcombe side had moved to a state of high alert. Anne was protecting not only her equestrian timetable and charitable commitments, but also the principle that no one was entitled to present her with a fait accompli. Her mood at that time was cold and resolute. She would not be disregarded on her own territory. Camilla continued to maintain the belief that everything would settle. She thought that if she held her ground, the common interest would ultimately prevail. She had not anticipated the seriousness with which Anne would handle the matter. With each passing day, the gap between the two sides grew clearer. One side, trusting that softness would eventually appear, the other already tightening control and investigating. Camilla's confidence rested on a false assumption about Anne's reaction, and that assumption itself was driving the conflict further than she imagined. Meanwhile, Anne did not allow time to pass unused. Immediately after ordering the review, she quietly set people to discover who had received instructions to continue preparations at Gatcombe Park. Trusted assistants were given the task of approaching each relevant member of staff, questioning them discreetly yet persistently. Most avoided the subject. Some shook their heads, "I don't really remember." Others answered only in general terms, "I simply followed instructions from above." Then silence. An atmosphere of caution settled over everything. Everyone understood this was a sensitive matter between two major offices, and no one wished to stand in the middle of the confrontation. Anne was patient. She did not press publicly, but allowed the approaches to proceed gradually, creating a sense of safety for those who might know the truth. After several attempts, one member of staff finally spoke. The person admitted quite clearly, "We were told to continue the work according to instructions from Queen Camilla's side, even though we knew Princess Anne had refused. We were also told to remain silent if asked." The admission was not lengthy, yet it contained sufficient detail the moment the order was received, the content of the instruction, and the warning to keep quiet. Anne listened without interruption. Her feeling at that moment was one of cold confirmation. What she had suspected now had concrete evidence. Without hesitation, she immediately requested a meeting with Camilla. The confrontation took place in a private room with only the two of them and a few necessary assistants present. The atmosphere was heavy from the moment the door closed. Anne went straight to the point, her voice even but sharp. "I have a statement from a member of staff." The timelines matched the survey activity at Gatcombe exactly. He stated clearly that he was instructed to continue by your side. Camilla denied it at once. She maintained a calm exterior. "The member of staff misunderstood my intention. Before the meeting, I had indeed been advancing the plan because I thought it beneficial. But after you refused, I ordered it stopped." Perhaps that person misheard or continued on his own initiative. She emphasized that she had never instructed anyone to maintain the work after Anne's refusal. In her view, it was merely a misunderstanding in transmission, and she was ready to clarify the matter with anyone involved. Anne looked directly at Camilla. She did not believe the explanations. In her eyes, everything fitted too precisely to be only a misunderstanding. Her emotion at that moment was controlled anger mixed with determination not to allow this affair to be brushed aside. She would not accept being presented with a fait accompli and then told that everything was merely a subordinate's error. To Anne, clear principle mattered more than any justification. Camilla continued to keep her tone mild, yet a trace of tension showed in her eyes. She felt cornered and believed Anne was turning a coordination issue into a personal investigation that placed her in the position of the accused. Her feelings were of irritation and unease. She did not wish to admit any fault that might damage her standing, nor did she wish Anne to seize the initiative. Anne did not prolong the argument. She left and immediately afterwards took a decision. The member of staff was moved to a safe place, isolated from any pressure. The purpose was solely to protect the original statement. It was not detention, but protection of the source of information, ensuring the person would not be influenced or persuaded to alter the account. Anne considered that only by preserving the original statement could the truth remain undistorted. Gatcombe Park was her territory, and she would not allow anyone to exploit ambiguity to continue. The confrontation ended in coldness. The two women departed with entirely different thoughts. Anne believed she was defending principle. Camilla believed she was being placed in an unjust position. From the moment the statement was recorded and the member of staff protected Anne's inquiry entered a new phase. It was no longer mere suspicion. There was now a concrete lead. Camilla began to feel the pressure more clearly. Each side held firmly to its position, and the distance between them grew harder to bridge. That evening, the news reached Camilla suddenly and heavily. She was informed that a member of staff had spoken to Anne's side and revealed details of the instructions to continue preparations at Gatcombe Park. At once, a sense of fear crept into her. The truth she had thought she could control now stood in danger of exposure. Camilla sat in silence for a long while, then began to act. She required those involved not to discuss the Gatcombe matter any further. Every exchange, even private conversation, was to cease. At the same time, she ordered the recovery of papers and correspondence that might prove damaging. Emails, internal notes, draft plans, anything that could be interpreted unfavorably were gathered and dealt with. Some traces of the continued preparation after the refusal were quickly erased. Telephone calls were controlled, paper documents retrieved, and even certain electronic memoranda deleted from the system. Camilla believed that without physical evidence, the statement of one member of staff would be insufficient to prove anything. She thought that in the royal environment, a single account could easily be dismissed as misunderstanding or external pressure. Provided the traces were removed, everything would return to a state of ambiguity, and the matter could be set aside. Her feelings at that moment were tension mixed with determination. She did not wish a coordination error to become a larger stain that would affect her reputation and position. Staff under her direction worked quickly, according to her instructions. They understood the sensitivity of the issue, and none wished to prolong the story. Within a few hours, many related documents no longer existed in easily accessible form. Camilla monitored progress and gradually felt more reassured. She told herself she had acted in time, that even with a statement, Anne would find it difficult to prove anything concrete without supporting evidence. She did not know, however, that the same member of staff had been taken by Anne to a private room that very afternoon. It was not a place of confinement, but a safe space isolated from all external contact. There, the detailed account of the earlier instructions was carefully recorded. Every timeline, every content of the orders, every reminder to remain silent, all were noted with precision. Anne left no gaps. She understood that the original statement needed protection from the outset, before pressure from the other side could take effect. While Camilla concentrated on erasing traces, Anne's side had already secured the most important source of information. Anne's mood at that time was clear-headed and resolute. She did not rush to publish anything but remained silent, allowing the other side to believe that everything was under control. That silence only increased Camilla's overconfidence. The night passed in an atmosphere of tension on both sides. Camilla believed she had timely prevented the danger. She thought that if she maintained her denial and no documentary evidence remained, the statement of one member of staff would become weak. The initial fear gradually gave way to renewed confidence. She even considered taking the initiative to meet Anne the next day to reaffirm her position. Reality, however, was moving in another direction. Anne held a detailed account recorded while it was still intact. Every word of that member of staff had become an important piece in the picture Anne was assembling. While Camilla focused on removing traces, Anne was protecting and strengthening living evidence. The contrast between the two approaches grew ever clearer, one side seeking to blur the truth, the other persistently holding on to every detail. Camilla had not foreseen that. She still trusted her ability to control information and still believed that within the royal family, power and ambiguity were sometimes enough to end a dispute. Yet that very confidence was causing her to overlook the greatest risk. That night, while she thought everything had been satisfactorily handled, the other side was preparing the next step quietly and more firmly than ever. The following morning, Anne requested a closed meeting. Those present included King Charles, Camilla, and the people directly concerned with the affair. The atmosphere in the room was heavy from the outset. Everyone sat down in silence, understanding that this was no ordinary gathering. Camilla maintained her denial. She spoke evenly, striving to appear calm. "I have already explained. This was merely a misunderstanding in coordination. I did not order the work to continue after Anne refused." She looked around the room as if seeking agreement, but no one spoke. Anne did not argue at once. She simply produced the recorded statement of the member of staff together with the remaining evidence obtained from the organizing side. The details matched with precision. The moment instructions to continue preparation were received, the requirement to maintain contact with partners, and the subsequent moves to conceal traces. Every timeline was clearly cross-checked, showing that preparations had continued after Anne's refusal, and that someone had deliberately removed information afterwards. Faced with that evidence, Camilla could no longer place the entire responsibility on staff. Her voice altered slightly as she tried to explain further that she could not control every subordinate and that there might have been a misunderstanding in transmission. But her words had now lost their persuasive force. The silence in the room was so complete that even breathing became audible. Charles sat listening from beginning to end. He interrupted no one. He merely observed. When every detail had been presented, he spoke. His decision was brief, yet decisive. For the time being, Camilla was to be relieved of direct responsibility for organizing the event, and another person was to take charge. He emphasized that the royal family could not allow incidents of this kind to continue damaging its collective standing. Charles's voice was not raised, yet it was sufficient for the entire room to understand that there was no longer room for further argument. Anne showed no sign of triumph. She merely made a few remarks about arranging the complete cancellation of all work at Gatcombe Park. The logistics teams were ordered to withdraw at once. The equestrian timetable and charitable activities were restored exactly as originally planned. At the same time, she required that henceforth every decision concerning the use of one another's spaces must be confirmed clearly in writing, leaving no room for ambiguity or misunderstanding. The request was delivered coldly, as though a new principle were being established. The meeting ended in silence. No one added any unnecessary word. Camilla left with a rigid expression. Her feelings at that moment were of injury and helplessness. She had believed she could control the situation, that erasing the traces would be enough to protect her. Reality had proved the opposite. Even temporary removal of operational authority was a heavy blow to her position. Outwardly, the crisis closed. There was no public statement, no outward noise. Yet the relationship between Anne and Camilla had been almost completely broken. Civil greetings remained when meetings were unavoidable, but the distance had become a deep gulf. Easy cooperation was gone. The minimum of trust had vanished. Each kept her own distance, and both understood that this crack would be hard to mend. Charles stood between them, trying to maintain overall stability. Yet he also recognized that the conflict between his sister and his wife had passed the point at which a few words of advice could bring reconciliation. From that day, the atmosphere in joint meetings grew colder. Gatcombe Park remained Anne's space, now governed by clearer rules than ever. Camilla was obliged to find other ways to advance her plans at the cost of increased caution and shaken confidence. The confrontation had closed, yet its after effects would cling for a long time to the already fragile relationship between those two powerful women. If Camilla truly allowed the plan to continue after Anne's refusal, do you think it was a mistake born of pressure or a deliberate act of overreaching authority? In a sea of videos, I am so glad YouTube managed to bring this one to you. We pour a tremendous amount of care into researching every single detail of these royal histories. I know using a TV remote takes a little extra time, but your likes and subscriptions are the ultimate motivation for our team to keep creating careful, high-quality stories for your screen. Thank you so much for your support.